Hello everybody, my name is Crux and today we will be going over controls. First I will be covering the basic controls, and then from there we will move into some more advanced controls and different applications for advanced controls. Let's get started. So firstly, we're going to quickly just go over start lines. So assuming you've never built a track before, this is one of the most important things in track building is you have to decide right away whether you're going to use a course or a circuit. Now there's different advantages to both. Circuits are great because you can make them shorter and still have a longer race. And courses are great because you can get carried away and not worry about where your track ends because you can just place your finish line. I'm not going to go over the different start lines in too much detail. However, I will mention that if you see some of these start lines and you don't have them, it's because you haven't completed the campaign yet. So go ahead and do that if you want to use some of these special modules. They're really fun, some of them, and nice to have access to different types of star modules. The other thing I'm going to mention is, as a newer builder, I'd highly recommend that we start with a course. Courses allow you to go off in any direction and not worry about where they finish. You can make them as long as you want. And people are much more likely to pick tracks that perhaps don't look as polished if they're a course because they know they're not stuck in it for 5 minutes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pick a course here. I'm going to place it here. So let's quickly go over the basics of the controls. Firstly, I'd like to mention that if you're using a controller, that's great, keep using it. But if you're using a mouse and keyboard and you own a controller, even if just for the track building, use your controller for the track building. It's much easier, it gives you more fine control. The keyboard has on or off basically, so this is about as tight as I can move things. Whereas in a controller has a really fine amount of movement, so it allows you to really be perfect about where you want things. So I absolutely recommend you use a controller for track building at the very least. All right, let's start with the camera controls. Your right stick allows you to rotate around the track piece you're currently focusing on. This allows you to get a better view of what you're trying to do. Your left and right trigger will zoom you in and out, which I find quite useful. And then your left stick to press, or right stick to press, my mistake, will put it on a focus view. So if you're off to lunch and you just want to reset, you can hit that and it'll basically make it so you can see most of your track piece. From there, we have basic track manipulation. So we have our left stick in and out will extend the track piece and bring it in, and left and right will bend your track piece on a flat plane. From that, we have our left and right bumpers, which allow more advanced manipulations. So right bumper will allow you to raise your tip and lower your tip of your track, as well as bend right and bend left. The left bumper allows you to bend your track in the middle while keeping your tip facing the same way, and also bend it up and down while keeping your tip facing the same way. So the combination of these will allow you to create different types of curves and geometry, and gives you the basics of how to create really cool corners and things of that nature. Another control we should definitely go over before we get too far is the track reset. So if you depress your left stick in, it will reset your track no matter what position it's in to a neutral place. The other way people do this sometimes is to switch track pieces. However, I would recommend that you don't do this. It's a bad habit to get into. You may find yourself deep in the process of making finite adjustments, trying to fit the track in somewhere, and then instinctually resetting your track by accident. From there, moving up and down in your D-pad will give you access to different types of pieces. We have our basic pieces. We have our special pieces. We have our animated pieces. And we have our finish lines. For now, for the most part, I would definitely recommend just starting with the basic and maybe a few of the special pieces. Also, I should mention that while you're building, if you reach a point where you're not happy and you want to roll the track back, left bumper and B will allow you to delete pieces and bring your track back to its original place. From there, we should talk about snapping. Snapping is when you are close to a surface, not all surfaces, mind you, but a lot of them. If you hit your right bumper and hit Y, the track will snap to that surface. Where this is good is if you need to create a ramp. Ramps are really easy, a really easy way to break track. Sometimes newer builders will build a track, and the ramps won't quite be on the ground, and they'll be able to verify the track in the tractor, which has a higher ground clearance than some vehicles, but certain vehicles will get caught on the ground. So highly recommend you get very used to using the snap tool to make sure that your track is on the surface you're trying to build on. That being said, there are certain surfaces that won't allow it. For now, I would recommend you avoid trying to build on the ground on those surfaces. Later on, when you become more experienced, you can manually align things, but you'll want to have a really strong understanding of the track builder before you attempt that. It requires a lot of patience and something that newer track builders should just probably avoid for the first while. Another super useful tool in your repertoire will be the replicate tool. So if you hit your right bumper and you hit A, it allows you to replicate a piece of track. And where this is super useful is if you have a curve you want to continue, or you have some weird geometry you want to continue, you can replicate to achieve this in a much quicker fashion than manually trying to do it. All right, another basic control is the modify dialogues, which we should absolutely go into. It's easy to misunderstand as a newer builder. So I'm just going to go over how it works because a lot of the time as a builder, you're going to find yourself in situations where you're well and truly past a piece of your track in your build process, but you've decided that you don't like it and you want to change it. There's an easy way to do this without deleting your way back. So let's say I've decided I don't like this piece over here. We can go back. So if you hit your right bumper and your D-pad, it will cycle through the top options. And we're going to go to modify here. Modify will allow you to scroll back through your track and make changes. Firstly, it'll allow you to do customization of the track by hitting X. You can move through the track and change the color. You can adjust the walls. So that's a turn. I want some turn signals. And maybe I don't want a wall on the inside or an extended wall. So modify will allow you to go back and do this after you've already made the track, which is my preferred way of doing this modification, is after I've created the track. However, that being said, there's sometimes you want to adjust a section of track. So let's say I don't like the way this transitions. If you hit A on a piece of track that you've got selected, it will disconnect that track, allowing you to back it off from that point and make adjustments. So let's say I want that to straighten out. So from here I want to reconnect, and it doesn't appear that I can if you just drive the track into itself. This is where we need to understand how to close the track. Left bumper Y is an automatic closing feature that will basically try to connect point A to point B if the track can reach it. And that being said, it will try in any way it can, which will sometimes create unorthodox results. So, for example, this. So do always be aware that it will attempt to connect whenever possible. If you get into a place where the track is connecting and you don't like the way it's connecting, Left bumper Y will turn it off and allow you to make changes. So definitely recommend you know how to turn that on and off as you're making edits. It'll make your life much easier over the long run. So let's say you were working on a piece and you're going to reconnect and you just decide you don't like what you're doing and it's not working. If you pop back into the construction, it will revert all your changes that you've made to the track up into the last point it was confirmed connected. So definitely keep that in mind. It can be good or bad. If you do it by accident, it's really unfortunate sometimes because you will lose a lot of track that you've been working on. However, that being said, sometimes you just get to a point where you're not happy with it and you want to reset. It's really useful in that situation. Okay, briefly, we're going to go over interactive objects. So to get to interactive objects, you're going to hit right bumper and right on your D-pad. There are simple objects, which are the barriers and the boost pads. One quick note on these is when you place them, you'll get a circle when there's already a thing there. Now, that being said, you won't be able to place another one. It'll select the old one. However, that being said, when you move past the point where you can select the old one to place a new one, you can actually backpedal it quite a ways and get things a lot closer than it appears. So that's a nifty little trick, useful for making things like forced boost sections, like so, and barrier walls if you have a section of track that you don't want people to go on. Secondly, another thing that's super important to know and takes a minute to figure out that I didn't know when I first started building, is if you hit right bumper and use your left stick, you can stretch complex interactives out. So normally when you're learning, you're doing this over and over and over to try to get these to work. So just right bumper and left stick will move your thing in and out. So really useful. Definitely keep that in mind moving forward in your interactive use. All right, let's move the track back here to our start line. And let's talk about advanced controls. As a newer builder, I would recommend that you use the basic controls to create your corners and such. But that being said, you can definitely learn advanced controls now, which will save you some headache later. So the advanced controls are roll offset, you see up here, and transformation, which you see here. Let's go over roll offset first. When you're trying to twist a track, typically it will raise the track from the lowest point on either side that you're trying to bring up. What roll offset does is it allows us to change this setting. So right bumper, left stick depressed will allow you to change this. So this is reversed, where it will drop the track rather than raise it up. And then central, which will twist the track rather than go up or down. Central is my preferred. It can create some really interesting and smooth corner geometry, especially when in combination with other settings. So absolutely recommend you get used to using that setting in particular, because I find it to be extremely useful in the long run. The other setting is the transformation setting. So what the transformation setting does is it allows us to adjust the geometry of how the game is handling a curve. So let's see if I can't get this. There we go. And move that in a bit, and let's see if I can't get that up and over. All right, perfect. Now, as you can see, this is a pretty tight curve here, and the exit looks kind of strange. So what we can do is we can actually, let's back this off here first. We can actually change the way the game is handling the transformation. So left bumper X allows you to adjust this. So it has different settings that will create different results. So firstly, we have smooth, which will try to smooth the track to the best of the game's ability. Then we have a linear setting, which will basically try to make it even all the way through. This can have some interesting results in certain situations. As you can see right here, we've got a kink in the track using that setting. We have easy in, which will prioritize the entry. And this can be useful in certain situations, mostly when your exit is already an exit that would be easy to do, whereas when your entry is a difficult one. In this case, though, our exit is actually not that easy. As you can see, it's naturally kinking the track. So if we were to try to continue on and get this to a place, we'd have a lip here, which would have a tendency to throw drivers off. So definitely tricky to use these settings in the right way. They definitely have their own drawbacks, each of them. Then we have our easy out setting, which allows the exit to be as smooth as possible while sacrificing the interior of the curve. And then I believe all we have left is the smooth again, yes. So typically 90% of the time, all you're going to want to do is you're going to want to stay on smooth. Most times that is the best setting. However, that being said, while manipulating a roll offset in conjunction with transformation, you can make the track smoother. So let's say let's go back to modify. If you want to manipulate from one piece to another and see both results, assuming the game will let you reconnect, which sometimes it will not, don't worry if this is the case, just roll your track back beforehand. If it's connected, if you have the automatic close track on, you can use roll offset, so right bumper, left stick, to manipulate the curvature while it's connected, and then you can use the transformation in conjunction with that to make a smoother track or a smoother line. So I want this tighter, and I'd like that top piece to be out a bit, and there, that looks good. So you can see in conjunction with the two controls, we can manipulate how the game slight adjustments and how the game handles the geometry. Now, here's an example of where the game will not let me close the track. If this happens to you, don't worry. Just quickly go back to your construction and roll back. If you really want to adjust that corner, you will have to unfortunately roll the track back to the point that it is adjusting on. Do keep in mind that these settings do have a tendency to create kinks. This can be okay if they are slight. Don't necessarily sweat it. If you want to see them further, what you can do is you can move into your free camera, and you can just get right down on the track and see what it would look like from the track level. And as you can see, even though I do have a bit of a kink in the barrier wall, my track actually is fairly smooth through that section. So something that I wouldn't necessarily worry about. It's a little lip. It doesn't look as pretty, but it will drive just fine. The track builder will allow you to go in free cam at any point, regardless of what you're doing. It will not delete a piece that you're currently working on if you go into free cam to have a look. So do use that as often as you like to get a better view, because sometimes the camera controls just do not cut it. I'm going to cover one more thing because I do believe that newer builders will be watching this tutorial in particular. When you're building your first track, it is super important to understand checkpoints. So if you've already covered this or you already understand this, you think, go ahead and feel free to skip this. But as a newer builder, you should absolutely understand checkpoints. So checkpoints are points in the track that must be crossed in order to continue on to any point further in the track. They also will make it so that you are forced to take a certain direction of a split. Assuming that you hit a checkpoint on one side of a split, it will not allow you onto the other side of the split, even if you attempt to cut. Checkpoints are useful. After, I would say, about 10 to 15 pieces, you should always place a checkpoint regardless of what's going on in your track. And the other time you should always place a checkpoint is if you have a jump, like so, you should always have a checkpoint afterwards. That being said, do make sure that people have enough space for landing before you place the checkpoint, because it's pretty frustrating to fly over them. The other time you should always place a checkpoint is after a wall-less section. So let's say I've decided to make this section wall-less. Anytime you make a wall-less section, it gives somebody the opportunity to leave the track. So, for example, they can leave the track from here to here if they're brave enough or have enough boost. That being said, if they decided they wanted to without a checkpoint, they could technically leave the track from here and fly to there. So in order to prevent this, we use checkpoints to allow us to create cool wall-less geometry without having people skip most of our tracks. And last but not least to cover as a new builder, which is not necessarily a control function, but super important, is budget. I'm just going to quickly cover budget. Budget is a point limit for building a track. The track builder will allow only a certain amount of points being used to build a track. Most track pieces cost 10. That being said, it doesn't care what length the track piece is. That is worth 10, and that is worth 10. So do keep that in mind. Anytime you can, do stretch the pieces out for length if you have a straightaway. Never keep them in the neutral, because over time you will lose points that you don't necessarily need to spend. The other thing is animated objects. They are very expensive. So anytime you're using an animated object, be aware that you're shortening your track by a significant margin. It's 200 points for most of them. Also, something to keep in mind for budget management is when you're making loops, do not do loops manually like this. Don't do that. What you want to do is you definitely want to use the loop function, because the loop function will allow you to create a loop for 10 points, whereas in the standard, if you were to make the loop yourself, it would probably cost upward of 40. Anyways, that's it for the basic controls. If you have any other requests or tutorials, feel free to leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if these are helpful. And thanks for watching. Until next time, Crux out.